Right, I'm really delighted to be here with my regular coffee chat with my friend Brice from Esoteric Atlanta. And today we are going to I'm going to start the show unusually by playing Maya Angelou's most iconic poem, really, and Still I Rise. It's such a powerful declaration of perseverance, defiance against oppression and adversity. And I think with everything we're all going through at the moment, it was a really nice reminder to really kick off the discussion of what we wanted to talk about today. So let's both take a listen.
You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? Just because I walk as if I have oil wells pumping in my living room. Just like moons and like suns with the certainty of tides, just like hope springing high. Still I have. Did you want to see me broken, bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries? Does my sassiness upset you? Don't take it so hard just because I laugh, as if I have gold mines digging in my own backyard. You can shoot me with your words. You can cut me with your lies. You can kill me with your hatefulness. But just like life, all right. Does my sexiness offend you? Oh. Does it come as a surprise that I dance as if I have diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past rooted in pain, I rise. A black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling and bearing in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak miraculously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the hope and the dream of the slave. And so, there I go.
So, where's my stop share button gone? Controversial, I know, Brice. Let's get the elephant out of the room before we dive deep about why we want to discuss about this today. You know, there's going to be lots of people watching it that will jump straight on and say, oh, she was an Oprah, she's definitely cabal. What do you say to that?
I say, where's your proof? Just because somebody, and that's the biggest, and I'm not saying she's not, but we don't know. We don't know. We don't have, and this arrogance that, I've kind of just come to the conclusion, and I know we're preaching to the choir because most of our subscribers are very grounded like we are. But there's a lot of people in the truther community that have become violently aggressive, and with they don't have the facts. They're in delusion, and we don't know. We don't. It's not fair to judge a person. I know that Maya Angelou is no longer living. She's passed away, but she had really great poetry. And there were a lot of people that were on Oprah who are good people. Oprah had a huge network. That was a great way to get your work out. So just to judge somebody as being in the establishment because they were on Oprah is unfair. It's very unfair. And that's just like saying that somebody that's just like saying everyone in Hollywood is bad, or everyone who's an athlete is bad, or everyone, or let's take it to the other side. What does the other side say? All white people are bad. It's not. We have to be a little bit more. It's complex, right? There's complexity here, and it doesn't. And regardless of whether she is bad or not, as far as like the side she's on, her poetry is still powerful.
And her life lessons are so powerful. And I think in a time, I still agree with everything you said there, but I wanted to get that out there before people start flooding at us. Don't you know? Don't you know? And as I say, I would go back and say, well, how do you know? And
Yeah.
so, you know, we've spoken loads of times, and both of us with Shanti from Aquarius Rising Africa too, as well, that, you know, that the message can still be pure. And at the moment, the censorship is off the scale, the oppression is off the scale, the lack of resilience that people feel that they've got, pride in what they're fighting for, what they're standing for is probably a better way, and optimism for the future. And all of these are areas that are really personified by that work, and that I can remember hearing that years ago. And I think sometimes we need to sort of our reset, not their reset, to take us back to take a breath and sort of say, right, let's recenter ourselves, and where do we want to go from here?
Yeah, it's then there's something too. I just want to bring this up as well, and I know this is going to be controversial for people who are deep in the truther community, but there is your lack of learning comes from both sides. So, and the law of one talks about this, and the Cassiopeans say that the one thing the law of one doesn't touch on that they wished had been touched on more is the negative side and
Mm.
what they do, because we can learn from that. There are things that we can learn from, and so regardless of whether somebody is good or bad, we can still learn from things, and the message is still there. And with everything we're going through at the moment, the intensity, and I think it's going to get even more intense, especially over here in the United States, as we build up to, we'll say, the competition, which is only a couple months away, the big competition. um, we are feeling the oppression. We are feeling major, like walking on eggshells, especially when we have a platform on YouTube. Because you just never know. It's almost like playing Monopoly with a 4-year-old. When you play games with a 4-year-old, they're constantly changing the rules so that they win. And that's what it feels like. And so, but every time we've been kicked down, that's still I rise. It's like the phoenix rising. That's that poem of hers is so powerful, and it's been able to kind of like live on all these generations because it speaks of the message itself, speaks of human resilience.
I love it. I love it so much. And resilience is such an important and overlooked area, I think, for so many of us. And you and I did a show a couple of weeks ago, and we looked at compulsory conscription. It was a couple of weeks ago on my channel. And one of the things that RFK has come out and said recently is, I think at the moment, I think 70% of the US applicants would fail the fitness test. They would never be able to get into the armed forces. And I'm only picking that as an example because that's a figure that was given.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is in the UK. But this is significant in terms of, it's not just that you and I talk the whole time about the link between physical and mental health, physical and mental resilience. And one is, when you build your physical resilience, it makes you feel very mentally resilient. And when you build your mental resilience, you're much more likely to be physically resilient. I think when we can look at people like Maya's life and what she went through, there's so much to be learned about the fact and that we don't have to be downtrodden. We know we can, and we do talk about, all the lies that we've been told. And I've done a few shows on that this week. But actually, we can use that in two ways. We can use that to empower us, or we can use that to be even more oppressed. And you touched on earlier about how oppression is always gone on. It's just which group they're targeting that changes.
Absolutely. Well, it's interesting you bring up. I have I wasn't going to plug this, but I have a workshop that I'm teaching this in Atlanta here. There's still some Zoom options available, guys. It's Alchemy of Movement, and we're talking about this. And
Brilliant.
and you think about like still I rise, like when you get knocked down and that friction. Well, if you and correlating that when RFK talked about the percentage of weakness physically, if we look at the human body, it's metaphoric, and it's mirroring the mental and what we're experiencing in our life. When you exercise and you break a muscle down, that's what makes it stronger, is that
Mm.
you broke it down because it has to rebuild. And I always tell my students, it's not the process of working out or exercising, that's not where the healing is happening. The healing is happening immediately after, when the
Yeah.
body is rebuilding itself. And once you've done something once, your body immediately gets a little bit stronger to do it again. And so when we look at ourselves and we deal with this oppression in the world, and I'm not saying that we're not too, I mean, there's issues here, right? Definitely
Mm.
there's issues, but this oppression, it's almost like the pearl and the oyster, it's created through pressure. And so we can only find out how truly strong and resilient we are when we're put in positions to have to be strong and resilient. And so the positive side of what we're going through right now is that we're getting the opportunity, and generations before us, we're not the first generation to go through extremely stressful times. We're getting a chance to rise to the occasion, and still I rise. Like, no matter what they throw. It's funny when she was talking about the sexy thing, Catherine, I started laughing because you and I have had people create conspiracies about us not being women when we're absolutely 100% biologically women. In fact, I'm on my period right now. But I think when she said that, I kind of chuckled. I was like, "Oh, so you're offended by my sexiness. You're
Yeah.
offended by Catherine's beauty, and still I rise." And so that also talks about the micro stuff we deal with when people project their anger onto us and try to take us. One thing I'm talking about my workshop this weekend is we see a lot where the ego gets involved, and like people, especially in like a yoga community or a physical fitness community, where beginners will scoff at more advanced people because, oh, there must be something wrong with them, when it's really projection of their own weaknesses. And even within yourself, when those weaknesses are exposed, you have a chance to redirect that energy and rise. You can either
Yeah.
crumble to the weakness, or you can use that weakness as inspiration to rise again.
I love it. Can you make sure you send me details of the workshop so I can put the link below the video?
Absolutely.
Because this is so, so important. And I think, at times like now, it can be very overwhelming for people, and everyone watching this will have their own very unique set of circumstances that they're dealing with. And we all know we're going to go through stages. We're going to go through stages where we feel really strong, and we're going to go through other stages when we can need a lot of extra support. And one of the things I love about some of the interviews that I've heard from Maya is her talking so beautifully about respect and how you speak to people, and how the way that you address someone, we all know that energy is shared between us all. And if you approach someone in a defensive way, they're going to feel it and put the barriers up, and you'll get that reflected back to you. If you approach someone looking at what's right with the situation and what's good about them, you're going to get a much more open-hearted response, and you might be able to melt down barriers, etc. So how do you think at this moment in time, where we're seeing so much online abuse, so much anger being projected at the most senior levels, what terrible examples, that we can really get back to being our best advocates of taking responsibility for how we speak to other people and treat other people, and of course, every other species as well?
As you're saying that, I'm thinking of something Marnie Alton actually said once, and I thought it was genius. Seek to understand, and you will be understood. So the power lies with us. So when we're seeing the online aggression, and I know, Catherine, it is shocking when you open up a
Mm.
platform, the amount of just flat out abuse people think that they can hurl at you is unbelievable. So I totally get, like, there is but if we want to change that, if we want to go back to a place where we respect each other, then we have to come from a place ourselves of trying to understand why people react this way so that we can be understood.
Mm.
And I really, that's one thing about Maya Angelou. I was thinking there's a clip, and she might have been on Oprah at this time. I can't remember where this, or even what the question was, but a young girl asked Maya Angelou a question, and she called her Maya. And Maya Angelou responded, she goes, "That's Miss Angelou to you." Because even in different generations, like when I was growing up, I called my friends' parents Mr. and Mrs. So and so, whatever their last name was. That's how we respected. My parents were, well, my mom's not Watson anymore because my parents are divorced, but my dad was Dr. Watson and my mom was Mrs. Watson growing up. That's how my friends referred to my parents. And then really close family friends that were adults, we would call them Miss Beth
Mm.
instead of just Beth. We'd call them Miss, and even my friends now that I grew up with who have children now, their children call me Miss Brice.
Mm.
So it's a familiarity because I'm their parents' friend, but there's also a distinction in respect of your elders. And that's something that's really big in the South.
Yeah.
I'm hearing now, like in school systems, because growing up, I don't even think I knew most of my teachers' first names.
Mm.
I only knew them by their surnames.
Same
And
here.
nowadays I'm hearing that students are calling their teachers by their first names. So, and in saying that, I do recognize that in the light side, someone could counter that and say, well, on the light side, there's no elitism, but there's no pecking order. But having respect for your elders and having that sense of respect for other people and the way you address other people is not necessarily acknowledging a pecking order. It's just acknowledging that somebody is older than you and therefore has more experience than you, if that makes sense. Like I almost like down here in the South, we say yes, ma'am, and no, sir. That's just how that is something. I know in other parts of the world they don't do that, but growing up, we are taught to say yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir. And I was at the grocery store like maybe a year ago. This is the first time this happened to me. And this young it was at the grocery store in more of the nicer area of the town. So the bag boy was like this young, like maybe 14, 15-year-old kid, white kid. He was bagging my groceries. And he said ma'am to me. He said something like, ma'am, can I carry your groceries out to your car for you? I almost had a heart attack that he called me ma'am, because I realized at that point that yes, I am old enough to be that kid's parent. And so he's doing the respect. He's been raised to be respectful to me as an older than him. But I didn't realize I actually, forgot that I was actually not 14 myself too. I was actually old enough. But then I thought, good for his parents. His parents have taught him to show respect to people. And he probably would have said, if I was a man, he would have said, sir, can I take your groceries to the car for you? So, I don't know. I mean, do you guys have that? And I always think the Southeast is a lot like England in a lot of the ways, in the way that our culture is, because we have a lot of English descent people here. But I would assume England kind of has respect as well in that sort of way.
Don't call each other sir and ma'am, although probably more sir. I suppose it would normally be Mrs. or Miss.
Yeah.
How you would know that, or yes, ma'am. But I notice the difference when I speak to my American friends. So yesterday I was doing one of my consults and had this lovely young man that I was talking to help him with his cat. And he actually kept saying, yes, ma'am, and yes, yes, Miss Catherine, and things like that, because I know his mum quite well. And I was like, wow, yeah, this is really interesting. And I think this is going to tie on probably to one of the subjects we're going to be covering on your show next week about boundaries. And there's a big difference. Boundaries don't mean a pecking order, and that there's much confusion nowadays, but common courtesy in how we speak to people. And I think the problem is there's so much, and I get it, I do get it. There's so much outrage about what has been done to us, the lies have been done to us. And again, as we always say, two things can be true. We're not saying that hasn't happened, it absolutely has. But at the same time, that's not an excuse for us dropping our behavior standards.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You, like a tuning fork, as we've often talked about, vibrations and energies will equal out. So if you're dealing with someone down here, don't let yourself be pulled down to that level. You be the one that's trying to help them rise, and still I rise up until your level. And for me, when I was looking at this, I thought, there's so much oppression in the UK at the moment. It's just got ridiculous. The social media side of stuff is ridiculous. The censorship. I did a show that's just gone up on my Rumble chat platform with Matt from Cultivate Elevate yesterday, and we were talking again about some of the hidden lies. And I think most of us, when I spoke to Dame Wigington on the geoengineering, and I think we mentioned last time, Brice, that if you search Catherine Edwards, Dame Wigington, my videos don't even come up. You can't even find them. And that's shadow banning, okay? If people don't understand what it is, they make it impossible. People will go on and say, oh, it's there, you're not shadow banned. But what they realise is if anyone's looking up geoengineering, it won't come up in the search, even if they put your names in. So they make it very difficult for people to find the information. And the problem is Dane made a brilliant analogy with the geoengineering. It's really hard for most humans. It's human nature that unless it's affecting you personally, there's only so much that you care or are prepared to take action on it. So if you haven't got chemtrails outside in your sky, or your weather's not being manipulated, you might sort of have a little bit of concern, but it's not really affecting you. So you're quickly on to the next thing on TV or whatever your issue or priority for the day might be. And I think this is the problem with the censorship and the oppression we're seeing now, is it's like that old saying, that it's the people that see these problems going on and say nothing that are almost as bad as the actual perpetrators.
Yeah, it's well, I think have we spoken about this on a show or offline? I can't remember. It might have been there was a show here in the United States. You might have in other countries too called What Would You Do? And it's almost like a candid camera show where they put cameras up and they have actors. And there's maybe a couple of people there that aren't actors, like they'll be like in a restaurant or something. And one of the waitresses will be speaking horribly to another waitress or a customer saying like racist or inappropriate things. And so the camera will focus on the people, and these are actors, like that's their job. And the camera will zoom in on the people who are not actors, who think they're just, and to see how they respond to what's going on around them. And it's very rare. It's like most people who are not people, they'll either just leave the situation because they're uncomfortable, or they'll just sit there and not say anything. It's very rare to actually see somebody like actually say something. And, as you were saying that too, I think culturally as well, one of the things that I love about the Southern culture is the way that women are treated culturally in the South. And it's very common, when growing up for me, women always had the door open for them. If I'm carrying a heavy bag and a man's around, he will come take my bag. The door, there's just a lot, and it's not a, I always would argue with like feminists. I'm like, no, it's like a respect thing. Like men, growing up in my school, if a female teacher walked into the room while the teacher was teaching, the boys would have to stand up. Not the girls, but the boys would have to stand up to show respect to the female. And so, when you have that in your culture, there's already like a certain ingrained level of awareness. And I don't know if this might happen in some places of Atlanta, but I would bet that when that ingrained culture is in you, like if I am in a small town in Georgia and a man is being nasty to me, I can guarantee you other men are going to come up and say something and protect me, because that is ingrained in our culture from a very, very, very young age. Other women won't, but they'll go get their husbands to protect the woman. Now, in a city, that might not happen as much because the city's more international. And so I think getting back to being able to, if we can use that as a template of like how humans behave, I think we just have to be very conscious of bringing this awareness back into our culture in general, of like aware of what's happening to other people around us. And I think you even said it your best at one time, Catherine, that so let's say you're in a city and something's going on, it's less likely for somebody to stand up when there are other people around than if you're the only other person and how interesting that you immediately kind of, oh, somebody else will take care of it, somebody else will do it. You immediately push responsibility onto somebody else. But when you're the only one that has to take responsibility, how quickly you can take that responsibility.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important message for what we're seeing now, because we all want big public figures to stand up for us. But even, okay, every time something happens to a public figure, and again, this is so difficult to discuss without people jumping down your throat, but let's take the Telegram owner. So he has been arrested and there's all sorts of charges against him. He's now being charged of child battery and the usual charges come out. Now, that doesn't mean, I have no idea what he's done and what he hasn't done. But what we see is everyone wants to use these things, these platforms. And then as soon as something comes wrong, without people doing any research of their own to sort of look into this, to sort of try and find out. And I know sometimes it's difficult to do detailed research into that, but you could listen to interviews and sit there with your eyes closed and say, what's your heart saying about this person? There's different ways we can do it. But what happens is as soon as someone up on a pedestal, it's happened, the vast majority of the population go to the no smoke without fire approach and sort of jump in, go for the kill and for the jugular. And again, of course, sometimes it's true.
Yeah, and I'll say with a Telegram guy, I know I've dealt with it. I know he's guilty of some of these crimes against children. Like I know I've had experiences offline with that. And it's and so on the flip side, we're seeing people like jump to his rescue because he offered freedom of speech. But again, two things can be true, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that the powers that be play with our human emotion and maybe our lack of critical thinking. And that's one thing I do miss about like my childhood, your childhood, is that we had to critically think more because we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have quick access to things. So we had to kind of like really sit with things. I saw the funniest comedian on a reel the other day. He was talking about mindfulness and how when we were growing up, mindfulness was not even a thing because we had no choice to be mindful. We didn't have cell phones to distract.
Exactly.
You go to the bathroom, you're mindful. You're waiting for the bus, you have to be mindful because you have nothing to distract you, right? And to pull your attention away. And so I'm glad we have the technology. I'm glad we can do these Zooms. And I think in a lot of ways it's been a very positive outcome. But I think we've lost our ability. One thing that makes me mad, Catherine, and I saw this with the RFK. I don't know if you saw this, but I saw a lot of people in our community getting mad at RFK Jr. for not stepping up earlier.
Oh, it's just ridiculous. It's like Wayne Dyer, we've said again, Wayne Dyer famously said the average person will find about 70, I think it was 70, but it was a huge number, things a day to be offended about. And this is the problem. I'm seeing this in every single response almost, not every single person who's responding, but every time you put something, instead of saying how fantastic, and instead of just accepting it is what is, and accepting that you don't know all the stuff behind it, and thinking, right, perhaps this is perfect time. Imagine the energy for that, instead of, oh, why didn't he do it sooner? I put a post up today, it's on my community tab and on my Instagram, about the beauty of lemons and cancer fighting properties. And people are coming in and saying, oh, what about the appeal covered lemons? And I'm like, surely if you're looking at lemons, I'm not talking about chemically poisoned lemons. I'm talking about real lemons. If you have to spell out every single thing, and the critical thinking we had to, because if the bus was late, you had to work it out yourself, and the bus timetable, you couldn't phone anyone. You couldn't look anything up on the internet. If you arranged to meet your friend next Friday outside the pictures and they weren't there, you had to decide what to do and use your common sense and everything.
To file a missing person report. Like that's how we make, 100%. It's when you left your homework at home accidentally, you didn't have a cell phone to call your mom.
No.
You didn't. You had to take the consequences of your mistakes, and you learn from that.
Yeah.
And that's whole seek to understand, so you will be understood. And so if you sit there and you are, at your sofa, like being mad at RFK Jr. for not speaking up earlier, have you actually sat and thought about why he's a Kennedy, for Christ's sake? Like, out of all the families in the world, his has had the worst luck when it comes to unaliving people.
Exactly.
So give the man a break. He's got his own children, and if you start to understand that and understand that there's complexity here, I think so many people, though, Catherine, are still under the impression that it's just all the white hats doing everything, which is
it's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And that it's black or white, and everyone's expected you're either good or you're bad. You can be, there's so many examples. Every single person watching here will have made mistakes. No one gets married thinking that their partner's going to abuse them.
Right.
No child sits there and thinks, when I grow up, I'm going to be a drug addict or an alcoholic or a pimp or a bank robber. Let's face it, life happens, bad choices get made. You either survive them and learn from them, survive them and don't learn from them, or you don't survive them. And I think in terms of where we are now and the impression and the censorship, I would ask every single person watching this to say, what am I actually doing about that? If my supermarket, as we call them over here, the great big grocery stores, if they've got Face ID cameras and the barriers. So there's a brilliant video that Jason Christoph put up about the little flip open barriers that go in as you go into the supermarket, how it's all just little stages to get you used to. You can't just walk in the shop. And no one thinks anything of it because you go up with your trolley and it opens. But now they've got them there. It's very easy to put a machine on there, so you have to scan yourself or your vaccine ID card before you go in. These little steps of leading in what direction, and healthy cynicism, healthy questioning, not questioning from, okay, looking to criticize, but okay, why is this? And how many people have gone up to their supermarket managers and made an appointment and said, I want to discuss this. I'm not happy with my face being shown on here. Why are you doing it? I'm going to take my custom elsewhere. Imagine if half the shoppers did that. Those supermarket managers are going to be straight onto head office saying, we've got a problem here.
Right. Yeah. Bottom line is the dollar is the bottom line, the pound's the bottom line. It's interesting, as you're doing that, they've started doing these things at big supermarkets in the United States where they'll have people at the doors where they you show your receipt before you leave. And that always annoyed me, Because literally I just left the checkout. Why are you checking my receipt? But I found out in the United States that's actually illegal. They can't ask you to do that because it's your property. Like once you pay for it, it's even though it's in their bags, it's your property. They can't just stop and ask you to look at your property. And I was told that if you just keep walking and ignore them, they can't chase you down. And I've been doing that. I just keep walking. I might smile at them, but I just keep walking, and they let. So there's little things you can do. And I love how you said with the dollar. I'll give an example. So we know that YouTube has a lot of rules and regulations around words that we say. Now, here's the thing, you guys, especially since YouTube is an American company, YouTube is allowed to do that as a private company. They're allowed to have rules. You can run your business any way you want. Where it becomes treason is if they're colluding with the government to do that. Hence why I'll just say Mark Z's letter was really informative, because as Facebook, if they are allowed, if it's just a private, if I own a private company and I don't want people with red shirts coming in, I can ban people with red shirts. Because that's my company. I have the freedom to do that. So people have to remember they have they can open up a platform. I can open up a platform like YouTube, and I can make it just solely a cooking baking platform where people put videos of how they make cookies. And if somebody puts in a video of making like a roast, I can censor it because my platform is only about baking cookies. You're allowed to do that. Now, again, the problem is when the government's involved. Now, here's the thing though. If it's a business and you don't like their customer service, that's why Rumble exists. And the problem, I mean, Rumble should probably up its ante a little bit to really be a competitor. But that creates that's a capitalistic, like that creates fair competition between businesses, right? So at the end of the day, you do have the power, as Catherine is saying, to be like, I'm going to take my money elsewhere. I'm going to go elsewhere and shop. Because especially if you live in a city, you guys, like granted, if there's something you have to get at the supermarket, granted, some of these big chain supermarkets are going to have probably cheaper prices, but I can walk a block up the street and there's like 3 mom and pop small shops, like corner stores that I can get almost anything in. Going to be a little bit more expensive, but it's a family-owned business. So I can opt to take my money and put it in a family-owned business and not spend it at one of these big chains. You know, I know there's one grocery store chain here in America that has this recording that plays like every 30 minutes. It says this is your social conditioning to make sure yourself. And I've seen people react to it like, what? But their sales have gone down because people don't want to shop and hear that every 30 minutes. You know, so you have the power with your dollar bill. I mean, Billy Carson has said that we want this game to stop. What happens if tomorrow none of us show up for work all over the world? What if we all just don't show up? This game will stop. You know, so it is that dollar bill. It is, you know, I will say too, and we can talk about this more next week on my channel. I just put a video up because I got a really nasty comment from a viewer because I use words like unalive instead of the M word because the algorithms, YouTube doesn't like the M word. But you could say unalived. And that I was just capitulating to the matrix by following these rules. Well, no, YouTube.
Someone sitting on their bum at home, not doing anything. Yeah.
Right. And I want to be like, no, YouTube has the right to set these rules. The problem is, though, is if the government is involved or not. That's the only problem. But if the government isn't, then YouTube can do that. Now, you can't, though, judge me for using these words or Catherine if you still have a bank account. If you still register your car in the United States, we have to register our cars. If you still have a passport, you still pay your taxes, because that's also capitulating to the matrix.
Completely. And if even you're capitulating to the matrix by watching these platforms that we're talking on, you know, because it's traffic and that's how they make all their money and get all the advertisers. So I think, you know, the reason I wanted to do And Still I Rise is to me, that's such a powerful statement. It really is. And sometimes when it all feels really overwhelming to us, when we feel a little bit, what can little old me do to make a difference? Every single one of us can make a difference with our daily actions. In fact, it's the daily actions that we do day after day after day that make the biggest difference. You know, where do you buy your food? What are you eating? Are you complaining to your local water authority, asking to see the test results and seeing what's in your water? Are you going to, I mean, in the UK, we have our local councillors and our local politicians, you know, whatever the equivalent is in whatever country you are. Are you noticing the chemtrails in the sky and going speaking to them and sitting there and making them listen to you, however much they squirm? You know, there's everyone can do something. Everyone can literally do something. And I think what I love is there's so many examples, and Myra's one, whatever her background is, I don't know and I never will know. Is there's amazing adversity that's happens to all sorts of people, but there's amazing strength that comes out of that if you choose to. And for me, all the stuff we're learning all about the lies, most of the time, not all the time, sometimes it really gets to me, but most of the time I see it as really empowering. And oh, that's what they're playing at. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll be quite, you know, it might even be getting a water filter. So, you know, because I don't feel personally I can change that situation, but I can take back some control of my family's health whilst I work out what else can be done.
Yeah, well, even like the whole Still I Rise thing, even with our dealing with the rules and regulations of YouTube, as this woman, we're still able to get our message across using pretend words, and still I rise, and still I rise, you know, and allowing yourself to be a martyr is not rising.
Yeah.
Allowing yourself to do things that are going to get you terminated or hurt you, you know, it's even in the situation where we're taking in food that might not be at its perfect biological state because it's been tampered with. Well, even though that's not the best situation, if you exercise, you're going to help your body detox that. And still I rise. Instead of just laying around and being fat and lazy and just being like, it's the food industry's fault. Well, yeah, they're doing something that's not good, but you can also help counter that, you know, by shopping locally and shopping from farmers markets and understanding where, but then also in situations, especially if you live in a city like me where we're getting toxins anyway, making sure you're sweating every day. So you're helping your body, and still I rise. You're helping your body be at its full health, you know, instead of just, I laugh a lot, Catherine, because we know that the other side of this thought that these were the answers, these were going to save everybody. Well, on our side, we all think the med beds are going to save everybody.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. Like it's the same thing, right? You have these little choices to make every single day, these little choices to make that are going to propel you in a totally different, that's going to ask you to, where you can course correct. My friend Cindy from Sacred Garden Yoga, where I'm teaching this workshop, she says every time we have an injury, that's just the universe asking you to course correct your energy, to replace your energy somewhere else. And so, you know, but if we don't take the bull by the horns and do that, then we're not rising. We're at that point, we are capitulating, and we're just letting ourselves go into martyrdom and victimhood.
I so agree. So I'd love to hear in the comments, I'd love to hear what step, however big or small, share what you're doing so that showing that you're rising above this, that you've still got hope, that you've still got perseverance, that you've still got resilience. What are you doing? Share, 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 because these little things, it snowballs, it snowballs, it snowballs. And on my community tab, I did a little clip again, and I'm not hero worshipping RFK at all. I just think he's incredibly eloquent at the way he expresses a lot of the problems that are affecting all of us. And go look at my community tab. It was a couple of days ago, I think, yesterday or the day before, I can't remember. And it's a very short clip from an interview he did, and it was absolutely brilliant, Brice. And it's talking about the vaccines, and it's talking about how if you are a parent now, you just have to accept that you cannot trust everything your doctor's telling you. And you can sit there and moan about it, or you can say, I'm going to do my own research. And he gives you loads of good resources there. They're all out there, which it's made so easy for us now. It never was in my day when I had my children, because they didn't have things like Children's Health Defence. And he said, you know, you've got to realize that once you just accept the fact that everyone's lying to you, it's easy.
It's easy. Actually, can I just shout out my sister for a second? She's done that. My youngest niece, May, who's 3 years old, she's got really bad asthma, and she's been struggling with it. She's born with this. Her father's got bad asthma. My aunt's got bad asthma, so it's coming from both sides, really bad. And she's young. She's 3, so it's been hard. But my sister has this little exercise trampoline in the house. That's May's favorite toy. Now, my mother's been freaking out because she has a nebulizer. She's got bad asthma, but my sister's like, no, no, no. She wants to jump. There's a reason why she wants to jump on this trampoline. She somehow knows that this is going to help her respiratory. And my sister, and that's her rising. That's May as a 3-year-old, not having any logical explanation, but knowing intuitively. And my sister is because she knows, my sister knows that the doctors are only going to be in business if she's really sick, if the asthma is really bad. And if her body's telling her to do cardiovascular work to help her breathing, even if she only jumps for 5 minutes and has to take an inhaler, she's going to get back up and keep going. Her father, my brother-in-law, is very asthmatic, and he's a marathon runner and places in marathons. So I have to applaud my sister and people who've gone like, well, wait a minute. If this is the weakness in my child, and my child is reaching for something that's going to counter and strengthen that weakness, I'm going to let them, because I know the medical industry just wants her sick.
I love it. It's the perfect example. Thank you so much. So the link to Brice's workshop that you can participate on Zoom as well is going to be below. Let us know in your comments. Let's have some positivity in this one. Share what's working for you. I love seeing people's suggestions. It's absolutely brilliant. And we will be back. For those new people, we alternate. So next week we will be back on Esoteric Atlanta, Brice's channel. Please subscribe to both our Rumbles as well, because we're both putting more and more content on there. And have an amazing weekend, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye. So I really hope you're enjoying this podcast as much as I am. And I just wanted to take a little break to tell you about the amazing products by the sponsor of this podcast, the biophotonic, EMF and bioresonance devices, which help us take our healing to the next frequency. So let me start with the bioresonance devices. Biophotonic have 2 amazing little devices, the little BioNexus and the biophotonic, and both of these are really the next generation in bioresonance devices. So let's start with the little BioNexus. This amazing little device literally sits in the palm of your hand. And it's now my go-to support, especially when doing my daily manifestations and affirmation practices. But it will balance out my frequency to work on whatever needs balancing for me right here, right now. So what are some of the benefits of this little BioNexus? Improved energy, decreased inflammation, supports our immune system, psychological homeostasis. But also it supports the integrity of the cells, improves our memory, cognitive, emotional and psychological states, and speeds up recovery. And just like we've been talking about today, it really improves human consciousness support. Now, the other bioresonance device, the biophotonic, absolutely amazing little device, comes preloaded with a range of therapies. And this will clear parasites, giving active protection. You can wear it with you. It comes in a little pouch that you can wear around your neck, and it detoxifies heavy metals, clears EMF radiation out of cells, cleanses bacteria and viruses, detoxes chemicals and toxins, DNA repair, pain repair, you name it. And it's even got calming meditation practices complexes that you can run to strengthen the aura field, and frequency packs can also be added to your water. I think we all know the detrimental effects now of mobile, Bluetooth and EMF radiation. They've been extensively studied, and I've done loads of videos on it. So minimizing our exposure is crucial. So what's really key is both the biophotonic and the BioNexus. They're standalone, lovely little devices that don't require Bluetooth connection, a Wi-Fi connection. You don't need to buy any frequency packages. There's no subscription fee, and you don't need a mobile phone to control them. There's no electrodes. They're completely wireless, ready to use straight from the box. So you can get these and a full range of EMF protection devices that you can use for yourself and your pets. Don't forget to use coupon code CE20 to get 20% off all products, including EMF protection. Thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. And if you feel inspired, please do share with your friends and family. This helps us spread the word and also helps me encourage some exciting new guests to take part in this podcast. And above all, stay curious and stay free.